under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during the webcast will be retained in accordance with the Council's published retention policy. Any members of the public seated in the public gallery may be filmed by the automated camera system and your image may be captured. Therefore, by entering the meeting room, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of these images and sound recordings for webcast and training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note of what is displayed on the screens in the room, as these show what is being recorded. Please can councillors remain seated when speaking, as the cameras are currently set to capture seated positions. Please do not move the microphones too close to you. You can request to speak as usual in committees by raising your hand, to speak by pressing the button with the face on it, and the microphone will go green and you will be live. For those in the building, there are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of a fire alarm going off, please leave the building. The main route is via the spiral staircase through the main entrance doors. Should this route not be accessible, the secondary route is via the main spiral staircase across the contact centre and through the doors. Once outside, make your way to the fire assembly point located behind the multi-storey car park entrance to Exchange Road. If you are unable to use the stairs, please wait in the chamber and you will be guided by a member of staff to the evacuation lift. I would like to request all mobile phones to be on silent and put away, and can everyone please talk into the microphones. The agenda papers for this meeting are available on the Council's website, and we will now commence with apologies of absence. Apologies of absence have been received from...
Yes, thank you, Chair. They've been received from Councillors Miller-Smith and Councillor Pennington. Thank you.
Does any member have any disclosure of interest or whipping declaration?
Chair.
Oh, sorry. Bob, Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on item 6, budget and council tax, personal interest as a member of West Sussex County Council, and item 11, health and adult social care, a scrutiny committee, personal interest as a member of West Sussex County Council and cabinet member for public health and wellbeing. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we come to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 8th of January. Within the supplementary agenda, there has been some clerical corrections which I move along with the draft minutes. Does the Commission agree the minutes along with those changes? Agreed? Thank you. We have no public in attendance, so we will move on. Item 5, we will start with the quarter 3 budget monitoring report from Councillor Jones, Leader of the Council, Caroline Martlew and Head of Corporate Finance, and Vicky Basley, Chief Accountant. This is included in the supplementary agenda. Councillor Jones, please can you introduce your report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. And may I say it's a pleasure to be introducing the first item of business with our new live arrangements, so members of the public can see us. So to introduce the budget monitoring report for quarter 3, Chair, service expenditure pressures on the general fund continue to be significant, with an anticipated overspend of 3.9 million against the original budget. The main service-related pressures include inflation, the pay awards, challenging conditions over the letting of the town hall, plus additional costs and the district heat network. However, the most significant variation continues to be the cost of homelessness or temporary accommodation, which is predicted to result in an overspend of £3.6 million, which is an increase of around £900,000 more on what we estimated this would be in the last quarter. So many people are coming forward who we have a statutory duty as a council to house, mainly from private rental evictions at the moment. But there is some indication that asylum dispersal from the hotels by the Home Office is beginning to become a factor in the increases. Chair, the district heat network overspend is predominantly because we aren't getting the connection fees for the utilities for the old town hall site now that the former developers aren't proceeding with their development. This fee we've lost is almost as much as we're overspent by. The gas prices are high, and shielding tenants from the full effect has also had a cost, although this should have been addressed with the rise in tariffs made last November. These cost pressures are mitigated by additional investment interest of around £1.3 million, leaving the council a sizable projected overspend, as I said, of £3.9 million against the original budget. Now, in-year mitigations that have already been identified are the MRP adjustment, transfers from earmarked reserves that are no longer required, and a reduction in planned transfers to renewals funds, which totals around £1.5 million. It's highly probable that further mitigations will have to be identified and actioned in Q4, but I can assure the Commission Chair that we will leave no stone unturned, including a further review of earmarked reserves, and also with several reviews planned that will continue into the next financial year to ensure everything that has been identified. Importantly, though, everything we're doing is keeping us above the £3 million minimum balance in the Council's reserves that we're aiming to retain for the purposes of financial prudence. It is a far from ideal situation for us here in Crawley, but it could be a great deal worse, and I think we're going to see what a great deal worse looks like when that's played out by quite a number of councils elsewhere over the country over the coming months. But for us in Crawley, temporary accommodation is still the elephant in the room. The expenditure on temporary accommodation is not sustainable, and there is a significant risk that the council will not be able to balance future budgets unless sufficient targeted funding is received from the government. We have told them this repeatedly, indeed I was up at an event in Westminster on Tuesday repeating that same message with quite a sizable number of other councils in a similar position to Crawley's, although in most cases not as bad. There's also, I think I should add, Chair, an inherent structural problem in the local government finance system. The system as it stands doesn't allow a mechanism for councils to deal with high levels of inflation because there's significantly more expenditure, like paying contracts, that will increase with inflation. But councils like us only have limited scope to increase discretionary fees and charges, which form a much smaller proportion. The government recently announced, amid a great deal of undeserved slapping from themselves, in my opinion, an increase to the minimum funding guarantee they give to councils. But to say that's inadequate is an understatement. This is such an inadequate rise that our finance officers have calculated that it won't even cover 1 week of this council's increased temporary accommodation bill. You know, let that sink in for any members of the Commission under any doubt. It won't even cover a week of what we have to face. Local government deserves so much more than this treatment, and Crawley certainly deserves so much more. Just to move on briefly to a couple of other items, cover the housing revenue account. The HRA position has an improved forecast, and the outturn is now anticipated to be slightly favourable by about 373,000. The overspend on the repairs contract is reduced to 1.8 million from 2 million, which is certainly going in the right direction. However, one piece of less positive news is that the right to buy capital receipts have effectively dried up, with a total of only 6 this year, which is compared to 43 in the same period last year. I think that's a real indication of how the state of the economy is, quite honestly. Although this has had some benefit in that it has resulted in additional income of about 600,000 in rents. It's also had a negative effect on the level of available capital receipts, which means that we're probably several £million down in terms of money that would otherwise have been available for the capital programme for building such things as new council housing. Just to cover capital, the capital budget's been updated by the items agreed by full council in December, and the forecast projections do indicate significant slippage to future years. There is a risk to the capital budget due to the reduction in capital receipts, as we're going to have to try and avoid borrowing as much as possible due to the pressure on the general fund that causes in the form of interest incurred and the repayment cost of any loan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, for your presenting your report. I will now open it up to questions and discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Councillor Lanzo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Jones, for the report. Just referring to page 4, paragraph 5.1, and the budget monitoring variations, we see a use of £3,037,000 of general fund reserve and leaving a general fund reserve minimum balance of £3 million. So just looking at those figures, if the same draw on reserves were to be repeated in financial year 2025-26, that would ever so slightly exceed the general fund reserve, I believe, and therefore require a further draw on reserves from elsewhere. And referring to paragraph 7 on page 6, that's the housing revenue account, we see, yes, a forecast underspend, but we see, if we take it literally, we're talking about variances. There's also, it contrasts quite sharply with the general fund, in that we're talking about a transfer to the housing revenue account reserve of £21 million. So that's quite a significant contrast, a favourable one might say, and it might be interesting to hear more about why that is. And elsewhere in this evening's report, there's some kind of reference to discussions around increased flexibilities in terms of what a housing revenue account can be used for and what the general fund can be used for. And I wonder, is there any indication of the possibility of the housing revenue account being able to be of more assistance to the general fund, albeit temporarily, perhaps, without detriment to residents, and the other way around? So is there any indication of perhaps a loosening of the kind of ring-fence requirements to assist with council budgets?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, if we had a further £3 million drawn general fund reserve, that would get us very dangerously near to the zero limit, which is an absolute line. What would have to happen then? We would have to start reviewing our earmarked reserves, our capital programme, which is pretty much what we're doing at the moment. And I think the point that we've been trying to make in the report, that would not be sustainable in the longer term. So you've got the budget for 24-25 on this agenda as the next item, but by 25-26 we are going to have to make those changes that are highlighted in the report.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, perhaps it's for the next item, but as we touched on it, I think it's relevant here as well. Is the £3 million general fund reserve a realistic, acceptable minimum, given that if this year's situation was repeated, it would be an inadequate reserve? and should we perhaps be increasing that level of general fund reserve proactively for 2025-26? And of course we do have the business rates equalisation reserve, which we are drawing on partly, proposed to draw on partly this year to replenish the general fund reserve.
I think there is a technical element to this, so I'm sure I'd be very happy to get Caroline to come in. I mean, clearly we're looking to maintain the £3 million level, and we're going to do as much as we can to achieve that. There are only so many levers we can pull, though. There are only so many things. I'd like to pay tribute to our finance team, who I think have been incredibly resourceful and resilient up to now in terms of identifying things. We've got senior officers working on several reviews now to ensure that we are not missing any opportunities to remain at a financially stable level. As far as the general fund is concerned, clearly we've drawn on the business rates. We have to we have to exercise a certain element of caution there, because there is an element of liability if we take too much from that, and we're not able to repay should a successful appeal against any awards on business rates take place against us. So we've always got to be relatively cautious on that side of things. But as I said earlier on, no stone is going to be left unturned. But I'm sure if there's anything technical, Caroline can add to it.
No, thank you, Chair. I think that covers it. I mean, yes, the business equalisation reserve is a sort of stopgap, but I think what I would like to just add, that reviews take time, and as we're carrying out every review, we need to then look at what's that reserve there for, and the risk associated with reducing it, because if we have a deficit on our business rates, that would hit our general fund in other ways. I mean, it's all very much interrelated. And I did like the term "no stone left unturned." There just isn't any slack in the system, but as a council, you do have reserves. We just have to be mindful that reserves can only be spent once. And I think your second question was to do with the HRA. If I may answer that, Chair. The HRA ring-fenced is a statutory ring-fence, so that cannot, that cannot be breached. I mean, obviously, part of the review is to make sure that the HRA pays its fair share, and that is something we've got to do by statute, and it is something that we're looking at. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lunnan.
Thank you. Obviously, thank you for the report, and yes, again, it's through, I don't think it's through anybody's fault here. It's very depressing reading. I'm sure everybody would agree with that. It's not great that we're, losing so much money year on year, and as we progress through the year, the amount of money we're losing is increasing. And I don't think I've got any actual questions about the reason why. I think you've explained it all relatively well. The only thing I would maybe request is, and it's obviously up to the chair of OSC really, the impact that increased homelessness costs are having now is increasing and increasing, and it's actually quite hard to get your head around how much it's increased, because it's increasing every quarter, but it's also, that's against the projection from the previous quarter, so it's quite hard to actually work out exactly how much we are now losing relative to what we thought we would and relative to a normal year. I mean, I would be in favour of us having maybe a report to Scrutiny about the increased cost of homelessness as a whole, and what the council has, because I know the council's been doing a lot of work to try and improve our position on the homelessness. So hopefully it's not any additional work for the council, but it's just to make it a bit more public in one very simple document. Hopefully, what the impact of all the extra costs have been, and what we've done so far, and what we're looking to do in future, and also all the lobbying efforts we've made to the government to try and just to highlight it and make it simpler for people to understand quite how imposing these changes are on our financial situation. So I don't think it would be any particular burden on the council because hopefully everybody's already aware of it all the time. I think everyone very nice feature of the senior officers, they are aware, so that's my only request really. So it's not really a question to you two, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Lunnan. I think one of the most frustrating things for us is if you actually identify all the individual things that are creating the deficit, the overspends, most, if not all of this, is out of our control as a local council to influence. It's there. We've just been left by the government, by the situation to deal with it. And I mean, one thing to talk about the level with the homelessness, the system, the local government system for protecting people from homelessness, certainly as far as we're concerned as a local housing authority, as a district and borough council, its system simply wasn't designed for this volume of people facing this plight. And there's no other way around this. I think the officers have tried very hard to keep an eye and monitor how the rates of homelessness have been increasing and the costs of temporary accommodation, but it's simply been very difficult. And I don't think I'm giving any secrets away by saying I've had some detailed conversations with the officers about how we can monitor this, because it is vital. And these are eye-watering statistics. When you get told in a quarter that it has gone up by this much, it is a sheer indication of the scale of the crisis. The housing system, I believe, in this country is broken, but this borough is probably suffering some of the worst excesses of that, and that's for any number of reasons. But it does mean that we are in a situation where the overall solution must come from a national level. We can only do so much here locally, and we will do what we can. I would add that the OSC has had some discussion previously about our mounting housing issues. I think it was it must be about 6 or 7 months ago now. But that was a suggestion that we gave when the situation wasn't quite as acute as it is now, but was still looking concerning. But if the OSC want to discuss that, I've got absolutely no doubt in my mind that we'd welcome that discussion, and I'm sure the cabinet member would be more than pleased to discuss what's facing his team. I think what I'd like to conclude by saying with housing, Chair, is that I want to pay tribute to our strategic housing team, who are facing the most incredible pressures, because clearly people come to the town hall and their personal situation is so bad that it's not designed to bring out the best in anyone. So there is a clear there's clearly a great deal of stress and anxiety going on, which our team are having to help people every day, often in increasing numbers. So I think we should be very grateful to them as a council.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Thank you. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair, and I support what Councillor Lunnan has just said. I was going to ask a similar question in relation to that. I think it would be useful to come to scrutiny in the future. So that's something that I would have asked as well. One of the other things that I would just like to ask is just in relation to the expected overspend on the town hall at 668k. Given where we are with tenants coming into the building, is this actually a realistic number given the financial pressures on us, and is this something that we can expect to stay at this level, or will it in fact grow, just based on that's in 5.6 on the numbers given?
I'd say, Chair, clearly we in an ideal world, all floors of the town hall would be fully occupied, and we'd be drawing an income, and that's obviously not happened up until now. I don't want to. I can't say very much at the moment, but there could be some very positive movement in the very near future on the occupation of the new town hall, which will make the figures look a good deal more realistic than you might rightly observe. They might not look at the moment, but it's unfortunately I can't say much more about that at the moment.
Can I just say something? Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate you can't say that. I was just wondering if it's realistic and whether we need to keep an eye on it, given the financial pressures that we actually have there. Because, you know, quarter on quarter, it's going to accentuate, if you like, our financial pressures that we have with the homelessness as well. And I do have another question as well. It's just in relation to 5.7. We talk about the contributions on sort of about IT replacement and vehicle replacement. Is what impact will that actually have on the services that we provide? If we're actually looking at 23, 24 and 24, 25, if we're going to not sort of replace those in the way that we might? That's the second question.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We don't anticipate any problems in the short term, but I mean, obviously that money won't be available in the future. So we may have to think about financing our vehicles in different ways in the future. But in the short term, it won't affect services. Sorry, the estimate on the town hall. The estimate on the town hall for the current year is realistic. It's taken quite a sort of prudent approach, bearing in mind we've only got a quarter left. And I think you'll see in the budget report we do expect the pressures to increase for the next year, but a lot of that does depend on how quickly we manage to let out additional floors. Next year's budget assumes 3 floors. Obviously won't add to anything what the leaders just said, but I mean, if we manage to get the 4th, then, you know, we start adding to our balances again, and it will make a positive contribution.
Thank you. Councillor Lone, did you want to make an amendment to the recommendation over the housing?
Oh, what, to get a separate... Yeah, if we can just have a report to the OSC about, you know, just a sort of a summary detail of all the increase in costs from temporary housing in the last couple of years.
To make
Is that reasonably vague enough for officers to work to?
Make that a D.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
That's okay.
Oh, can somebody second that, please? Second. Right. Just see. Right, thank you. Is it agreed? Sorry? Can we agree that? Yeah, is that agreed? Agreed? Yeah? Thank you. Right, all the committee members had the opportunity to speak. I don't think there's anyone else, is there? No? So I move the recommendation with the added amendment from Councillor Lunnan. I move the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask for the Vice Chair to second, please.
Yes, I second that.
Right, item 6. We will now move on to the Budget and Council Tax Report from Councillor Jones, Caroline and Vicky. This is included in the supplementary agenda. Councillor Jones, please can you introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The General Fund budget for 24-25 forecasts to take from balances of £1.2 million. This will be reduced by the increase in the funding guarantee grant announced on Wednesday the 24th of January, which was too late to be included in the budget. The details are not available yet, but as I said earlier, we estimate this will be around £138,000, which is more than swallowed up by the weekly cost of homelessness to the council, which is currently £153,000 and only likely to get worse. Excuse me. The drawdown from reserves is £190,000 more than forecast in the budget strategy in November. However, the identified service expenditure pressures have worsened significantly, as reported in the Q3 budget monitoring report. The main additional pressures being an additional £1 million for temporary accommodation and £630,000 for the town hall and district heat network. These increases have been balanced by a favourable increase in the level of business rates. The general fund budget assumes a council tax increase below the referendum level of 2.99% or £6.76. That will result in a £232.10 charge for a Band D property. The budget also assumes that fees and charges are increased at 7% where feasible. While the rate has fluctuated, this is around the percentage rate of inflation has been at over the past year, and this reflects the council's cost increases. We were able to increase fees and charges by less than inflation last year, but increasing pressures mean we cannot repeat this again this year. We have, however, tried to strike a balance, Chair, and this increase still compares very favourably to nearby councils, which are either on a par or higher. I understand West Sussex County Council are increasing their fees and charges by 8% and Mid Sussex District Council by 10.3%. This level, as I said, has been chosen because we really are trying to strike a balance between affordability and the actual costs facing the council. To address the housing revenue account, the rent increase contained in the budget is 7.7%, which is CPI plus 1%. This is the amount that government has identified as acceptable to raise rents by this year. Many of the cost pressures for the HRA are the same as the general fund. The HRA has its own 30-year business plan to ensure that spending plans remain affordable. The HRA balance is anticipated to be around £3 million at the end of the period, which is a healthy balance. In terms of capital, the budget's been updated with the detailed capital investment programme for Crawley Homes of £13.95 million. The general fund capital programme was improved by full council in December 2023. Just to confirm, the final local government finance settlement is anticipated in February. And regarding the capital strategy, which is in Appendix 9, this report also covers that, and it provides a high-level overview of how capital expenditure, capital financing and treasury management activity contribute to the provision of the council services. Now, while I believe this is a solid foundation, Chair, our capital strategy is something we will need to strengthen even further going forward as funds get less and the need to prioritise capital spend and understand the revenue implications of the capital programme get more important. It will also need to be reviewed in terms of asset management planning and the increasing need to get best value out of our asset base, and that's going to be ongoing. I would just add as well, Chair, that there's also going to be an all-members seminar on the budget on the 8th of February. But aside from that, clearly happy for the officers myself to take any questions on what's tabled so far.
Thank you for the presentation and to the finance team for preparing this budget under difficult circumstances. We hear a lot about councils issuing Section 114 notices, effectively indicating an inability to set a balanced budget and therefore going into a situation where they run only statutory services, albeit they lose the cap, I think, on their council tax. But there is a stage before Section 114 that some councils are using, which is to apply for a dispensation to be able to use capital or some capital for revenue purposes in exceptional circumstances. Where are we with considering that approach, should it ever be necessary as an alternative to a Section 114? And on paragraph 6.11, the town hall business rates, vacant floors and rental income. So the 2024-25 budget assumes 3 floors of the Create building being let. But when you look at this paragraph, and I just want to check my understanding of it, if 3 floors are fully let, we see an increased income of £600,000. That's what the paragraph says. But against void rates of 460,000 and other costs, running costs of 407,000. So that would be a total of £867,000, which, if they weren't all fully shared at that point, would be a deficit on the building, even with 3 floors occupied. Now that might not be the case. It's just I just think the wording could be read in that way. And also, there's a remark here that the void costs, kind of once fully let, in other words, once the building is fully let, will be shared with tenants through the service charge. But presumably, even with the building being partly let, those costs are shared through the service charge of those tenants who are in the building. That's not clear from the wording of this this paragraph.
Yeah, if you want to start.
Right, section 114 notices and capital, applying for capital direction. I would say, as a council, I would not advise us to do this. It's the start of a very slippery slope. I mean, one, you haven't got the level of capital receipts. So what would happen is we would get permission to borrow. That borrowing will be at PWLB plus a prohibitive extra 1%, which is really to be avoided. I mean, I think the first stage is to review the reserves that we've already got and to do the review programme that we're going to be embarking on very well. We're going to be continuing to sort of identify our own financing, because really you don't want to be paying extra. And I think the second question was about the town hall. Apologies if the paragraph isn't clear, because I think what we try and describe there is budget to budget. But what we mustn't forget is this year's base budget has already got 2 floors, rents for 2 floors. So it's only the additional floor is the extra 600. And all the time that we've got empty floors, obviously the council will be picking up a higher proportion of the service charge. And I think the reason the costs have gone up is that the building hasn't been rateable. So the sort of period of empty rates will finish 31st of March. So from 1st of April, any floors that aren't occupied, the council will have to pick up those rates. But obviously, as we start getting tenants, they will pick up their rates, they will pick up their own heat costs, and they will pick up a bigger proportion of the service charges as well.
Can I just add a couple of things at that point, Chair? I would imagine that anyone listening to this discussion would find it quite alarming. But I think I would say to the Commission, many, if not most, councils are going to be having to discuss the prospects of what might happen if their council is in a difficult financial position. Applying for dispensation, I would have to say, is possibly one of the least appealing alternatives that we could have. As far as I can see, aside from the point that Caroline's made about we don't have that many assets to divest ourselves of, effectively, to get this from the government, you have to almost go into an exercise of asset stripping, which is equivalent to what would happen if the commissioners came in if you did have a declaration of Section 114 in the first place. So it's a really unappealing option, not least of which then talk about removing the cap on council tax. I mean, we've seen the government allow this happening, but it's been used almost as a very punitive measure, which has meant that the local residents have suffered. I mean, one could point to Croydon, where there was a massive council tax increase because the government made the decision that they were going to concentrate it on the costs on the local council taxpayer. So, so clearly, this would be an appalling position for residents, and we're doing everything we can to avoid being in that position in the first place. Not that I resent the questions about what we consider as alternatives, certainly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't advocating that course of action. I just wanted to get your opinion on it. But just going back to the Town Hall point, I do think paragraph 6.11, there would be benefit in just reviewing the wording of that to make clearer the true situation. And I think removing any ambiguities there would be helpful in the final report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question in relation to the repairs and maintenance, where we've had 1.825 million overspend in Q3 on this. And I noticed further down when I was reading that the actual stock condition was last looked at in 2011, which is quite a considerable number of years ago. Given, again, where we are in terms of the pressures, is there anything that we could be brought to commission to actually look at what we're looking to spend sort of future, if you like, money on, given that we haven't looked at the stock? If you were actually in the private rental section, landlords would normally look at the condition of their properties 6 monthly or maximum of 2 years, and yet we haven't looked at this since 2011. So is this a realistic numbers, and are we going to see a huge, we've done a 17.6% increase in the budgets, but actually is this realistic, and is that likely to be considerably higher given we actually don't really know what our stock looks like?
I think, and if anyone wants to add on this, I'd be happy with that. I think we've got to differentiate slightly between an overall stock survey and actual inspection and confirmation that people's living conditions are in acceptable state, because there's more regular monitoring of that. I think repairs and maintenance as an overall item of expenditure is one we could actually spend quite a lot of time talking about, Councillor Hillier. In terms of what's happened is we have seen an increase, quite a substantial increase in the demands from tenants over recent years. Now, some of that is down to genuinely things needing to be replaced. I think one of the things that's also added to this is there's a greater awareness now of some of the areas of concern, like damp and mould, and we've seen the housing teams have been approached a lot more about that. I'm not trying to sort of understate that as a problem. I perfectly understand it is, and our Crawley Homes teams are doing some incredibly good work in actually trying to address this as an issue. Clearly what we've tried to do is we've tried to ensure that responsive and planned maintenance is going ahead to a high standard. Recently the government has introduced even higher standards requirements, far more legal obligations have been introduced in terms of how we respond to issues as a council. Not all of which are fed through yet, but I think I want to give you some reassurance that yes, the budget is over and above what we thought it would be, but there have been good reasons for that. And at the moment, we're not as concerned about the strains on the HRA as we are on the general funds. But clearly, there will be decisions that need to be made in the future in order to ensure that we continue to properly run the HRA and budget for it.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that you know, there is likely to be, if we continue at that sort of rate, are we going to meet the statutory requirements if there is continued pressure in terms of the state of the properties?
Ian might want to add something, but I'm confident at the moment that yes, the answer to that is yes, we will continue to meet our obligations and the standards required of us, and I'm certain I and Councillor Irvine would have been informed if there was any doubt about that.
Yeah. Sorry, tried to speak, it didn't work. I mean, just to repeat, I guess, and emphasise that it's not that there's been no kind of look at the condition of the stock all the way. We're just doing it in a different way, which reverts back to the full systemised survey of stock on an ongoing basis. It wasn't really required past 2010 because there's been such an investment in the decent homes and the amount of work that happening there. So a lot of the internal stuff and the external had been kind of replaced on a systemic basis, and it got moved then to kind of a modelling type approach, looking at what was coming out of the responsive. As we get into 10 years, now's the time to shift. It also fits in with what the regulator would expect and what they're asking kind of all housing authorities to do. I think that's slightly different to what we're seeing in terms of what's coming through in terms of the bills. So there's a twin effect going on here of one, demand coming through pandemic, and then secondly, the costs involved within the construction, which we've talked about before, on top of then some a much greater focus on things like damp and mould, and that's just constituting something that you will see replicated right across the sector. So it's not a locally specific issue that related to actually separate things, but I can understand where the question came from.
Councillor Lunn.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'll start off by repeating my previous comments. This is fairly, yet again, depressing reading. You know, that we're budgeting to make quite a significant loss. I do, again, appreciate and thank the officers for all their works in trying to minimise that and the efforts they've made with the savings to try and offset that. There is a limit to what we can do if the temporary housing costs keep as they are. In the end, there'll be nothing we can do apart from shut the town hall down and welcome in somebody else to try and do something better, but I don't see how they could. My particular questions arise around business rates. I've got a couple of them, starting with it's just in paragraph 5.7, and this has long been a bugbear of mine. It says how the council has to pay a significant tariff to the government without any sort of explanation, but from what I can see on the table below, the tariff is pretty much 85% or so of all that we collect. Is there any, is the calculation of the tariff sort of standard across all councils, or Crawley penalised better or worse than other councils? I'm just trying to understand how because you provide a bit of detail on where the levy comes from, and I'll come on to the levy, but I'm just interested to know how the tariff is calculated, if you're roughly aware. That's in the table in 5.8.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise in advance. I'm not a business rates expert, but the original tariff would have been calculated when the new regime was brought in, and it would have been worked out on sort of needs assessments and government control totals, and that at that point, Crawley's need would have been worked out, and it's just sort of updated annually, and it's terribly complicated, and there's nothing you can do to make it better. So there's nothing we can do to improve our business rates in the sense that, if you structure things differently when you look at your capital expenditure, you can make savings, but you really can't. What goes to government. The only sort of differences are to do with the sort of appeals provisions and rating lists, and that's why it can fluctuate so greatly, and hence the need for the business rates equalisation reserve, because it can go up as well as down. I mean, at the moment, it's looking really good for next year, which is helping to sort of keep the council afloat. It's looking pretty good for the year after. After that, in the budget report, we see it sort of dipping again, but that's to do with the reset. And the business rate reset means that at the moment we can keep, I think it's 50% of our growth, minus the bit that we have to give to West Sussex, but when that gets reset, we may lose all of it or part of it, and there's no certainty over that system either. And I think this budget, because it's sort of been overtaken by the sort of homelessness demands, it's almost dwarfed the financing requirements, the local government ones that have been put off and put off again. So that is a risk, but not for the next 2 years. And I hope that answers the question fully.
I mean, I think it answers it that was as much as I understood it. I guess the point I would want to make is that I fully understand that Crawley had a need and it was calculated at the time, but clearly, currently, Crawley has a bigger need due to the homelessness situation that we've got going on. So if our need is increased, why is our proportion of business rates that we retain? And to be clear, business rates are, Crawley does very well collects a lot of business rates because we are a business-friendly town. There are lots of jobs in this town, and one would like to think that residents would also get to see some of the costs that we incur as residents of a town with a lot of businesses. So there's lots of traffic involved, there's lots of pollution, there's lots of lorries moving in and out. There are obviously lots of jobs which are benefits to Crawley, but there are also, things that are not so good compared to a town that wouldn't have a lot of businesses. You'd like to think that we'd get some more benefit from that, but instead the money is just all shifted up to government and they decide where it goes, sort of. And just alluding to somewhere else in this report, I just want to highlight, and I'm sure it's a frustration that you have, that getting a 1-year settlement in February that you've then got to put into a budget that you've got to put into January before you get to February is clearly doesn't make for good financial planning. And I would, again, I'm sure you have made this point to government, but I really think it is unacceptable that you can't plan properly what the budget is going to be until you find out from government what they're going to give you, and they give it to you so late in the day. I mean, again, there's nothing much Crawley Borough Council itself can do about that, but I'm just highlighting the point that it makes planning very difficult. The last question I had was just on the business rates equalisation reserve. I mean, in effect, when you set the budget and what it's transferring to or from the reserves against, you could set whatever you wanted as say we're going to get 8 million we think we're going to get 8 million this year, or we've got 10 million, so we're going to put 2 million in reserves. We think we're going to get 10 million next year, only got 6 million, so we're going to take 4 million from the reserves. But the actual amount you set as the sort of, this is what we think we're going to get from business rates, and then balanced by the reserve, you could set to whatever level you want, or is there some calculation in how you get to that figure? I guess is my last question.
Thank you, Chair. I assure you that there are detailed calculations that back this up. We have technical accountants who deal with this subject. So the fluctuations are the major reason is because we're always a year behind with the adjustment, and I think it's probably better if I give you a written answer because I'm really struggling to explain it to you. So the equalisation reserve is really used for sort of the prior year stuff, and this is to do with accounting adjustments. Anything else you're allowed to accrue for, not business rates. Part of it has got to lie where it falls, so you're always dealing with 2 years at the same time. Then you've got the added complication of adjustments to the sort of appeals provision, and depending on how far you're away from the rating list, which gets redone every 4 or 5 years, makes that more uncertain. So you're dealing with all these, I mean, I think of it as lots of sort of plates spinning. You then set it, and then you have to deal with the aftermath, and that's what the reserve deals with. You can't set them at whatever level you want. It's got to be backed up by a sort of calculation, and it's dealt with through what we call the NNDR1, which is a return that goes to government, which is audited.
Which I just signed tonight, funnily enough. Councillor Lunnan, I feel your pain, I think is the shortest way to describe this. I mean, we still deliver a great deal as a council. We just, unless something drastically changes at a national level, we're just going to have to start thinking what we will need to do less or be done less in future. Business rates, national formula, I'm afraid, again, totally out of our control. And I do agree with you, and probably can express it a bit more strongly than the officers can. It is more than frustrating how much we collect and how much we then see that we have to hand over that flows out of the area, flows away from what we can do, particularly when we're looking at the deficits that we've got. It would be incredibly helpful if the government were giving 3-year settlements rather than 1 year or even longer. I mean, the problem is we just have no certainty. Every year there's, well, the only certainty we seem to have is that the government comes up with a worse settlement year on year, but it's not helpful, and it's not good for stability or planning for local communities. On the business rates equalisation reserves, for all the reasons that Caroline set out, we have to be cautious with that. If we lost a major appeal, we'd have to hand back an enormous amount of money, and it could easily wipe out what's in the reserves and more besides if we were too reckless with using it. Probably that's a very awful layman's way of describing it, probably, but apologies for any experts in the room.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. We've all had the opportunity to speak. Is there anyone else like to ask? No. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair seconds, please.
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Item 7. We will now consider the Treasury Management Strategy from Councillor Jones, Caroline and Vicky. Thank you. Councillor Jones, could you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. The Council is required to have a Treasury Management Strategy approved for the year ahead. It broadly follows that approved last year, the current strategy. It underpins the Council's management of its cash, investments and borrowing to ensure that cash flow is adequately planned and available when needed. It is based around spending plans and the capital programme in the budget report and forecast spend at this time. There are a range of prudential indicators around that based on spending plans and how they'll be financed. The Council's external debt referred to in the report is the HRA self-financing loan, repayments of which started in 22-23. The policy includes the minimum revenue provision policy statement, which documents how the Council will prudently pay down its debt each year. It also sets the limits of cash investments, who we can invest in, and up to what level to keep our cash safe, based on the principles of security, liquidity and yield. They are the primary considerations before we apply any other ones. And I'm very satisfied that we have had a very solid and successful year. Most of the Council's investments are with other local authorities, as anyone reading the papers will probably have seen. Most who have their own climate emergency declarations. The Council's bank account is with Lloyds, who follow the UN principles for responsible banking and the Net Zero Bank Alliance. The strategy states we will prioritise banks who follow these two principles. Members will note that our counterparty limit with local authorities is being increased to £15 million from £10 million. local authorities continue to offer the best deals. We raised this to give us scope should a good investment come up. It is a limit that we might not necessarily go up to, and we would follow the normal investment procedure for keeping our money safe, so it's still considered prudent. Addressing interest rates, compared to the prospects for interest rates projected for next year by our Treasury advisors, Arling Close, we are projecting a better yield due to a few old low interest deals maturing and 8 new deals locked in at interest rates ranging from 5.25% to 5.6%, which is good. And I think it's certainly encouraging news that we're locked into such good interest rates on forthcoming local authority loans. But such rates, I'm afraid to say to the Commission, are likely to gradually go down, as much as we might like them to stay at that level. But as we have a number of good rates locked in, we may not see the impact on us immediately, however. Commercial investments, investment properties, regulatory and professional guidance is that commercial activity should be proportionate with other activity. The biggest investment that we have as a council chair is the Create building, and there is no debt associated with the investment properties. I think that covers the main points. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. As we discussed, a lot of local authorities, they are struggling with their finances, and our loans to other local authorities, say if any of them they default, what impact that will have on our finances? Do we consider that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I can't remember which statute it is, but local authorities aren't allowed to default on their loans. I suppose worst case scenario, it might cause us a sort of blip in our cash flow if it came back slightly late, but they have by law got to repay them. I think there is an issue if you lend to a local authority that's declared a Section 114 notice, and we wouldn't lend to an authority that has issued a Section 114 notices for just that reason. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask on table 5.1.3, one-for-one receipts. We've sort of seen a fairly steady level last year and this year. I know we talked about the falling, and yet the forecast, Councillor Jones highlighted how low they'd been, and yet the forecast for, is one-for-one receipts right to buy receipts, just to check? Am I getting those mixed up?
No, you're right.
So it's just the forecast for 24-25 suddenly shows them tripling. And I'm just intrigued to know where that forecast has come from, because obviously that's quite a large chunk of our money. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, those are the one-for-one receipts, which are the ones that can only be spent on HRA development or acquisitions. That is the spend profile of the ones that we've got.
All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I move on the recommendation. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask the Vice Chair to second, please.
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. The recommendations are agreed. Item 8. We would now consider the review of the Council statement on licence policy, report from Councillor Yasmin Khan, Cabinet Member for Public Protection, and Georgina Boutet, Head of Community Services, and Dan Cambry, Public Protection and Enforcement Manager. Councillor Khan, would you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, my voice, so bear with me. Okay. The report outlines recommendations to adopt proposed revisions to the Statement of Licensing Policy for the period 2024 to 2029. The Council, in its role as the licensing authority for the Borough of Crawley under the Licensing Act 2003, is required to publish and keep under review a Statement of Licensing Policy. The Statement of Licensing Policy sets out the way in which the Council as licensing authority deals with applications made under the Act, enforcement, and how the Council will work with partner agencies to ensure the licensing objectives under the Licensing Act 2003 are promoted and upheld, namely the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, the protection of children from harm. The report encloses the Council's draft statement of licensing policy for the period 2024 to 2029, which has been consulted upon and the feedback incorporated. The consultation found there to be broad support for the changes, both from the public and from partner agencies such as Sussex Police. The feedback obtained from the consultation and from the licensing committee is contained within the report, which outlines broad support for the revised policy. It is important to note that the proposed Statement of Licensing Policy 2024 to 2029 is significantly different from the current Statement of Policy covering the period 2019 to 2024 and has been rewritten to reflect this. This is due to the significant changes in the policy landscape over the past 5 years, particularly as the result of COVID-19 pandemic, alongside new obligations placed on the licensing service, alongside changes to legislation, compliance requirements, and regulatory practice. Appendix F outlines the changes made to the policy and provides a summary of the reason for these changes or where new sections have been added to the policy. There have been significant changes and additions in relation to public safety, public nuisance, crime and disorder, and safeguarding, which strengthens our current commitment to promote and ensure and enforce the licensing objectives to make licensed premises and licensed activities safer for the public. The revised policy aims to be clearer and use more accessible language and formatting to ensure it can be read and understood, to ensure that license holders and prospective license holders are clear on the expectations and framework they are expected to operate within. The Commission is asked to consider the recommendations within the report and make any comments, if any, wish to submit to the Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. It's just a question, because I notice in 18.5 and 6 it talks about ward councillors playing an important part in this. Can I just ask how councillors will be informed if they're to play a part in this role? Is there a sort of strategy in place for this?
When the council receives representations or submissions for a review application, ward members are consulted upon that as a matter of course. So if a licensed premises falls within your ward boundary, you're contacted to submit to the subcommittee anything that you wish to be considered. So that's how you're involved in that under 8.4 and 5.
All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I move on to the recommendation. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Council through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair seconds, please.
Yes, I second that report.
Thank you. Item 9. We now move to the PSPO for council-owned multi-storey car parks report. I believe that is Councillor Norris leading, but also Councillor Khan, Georgina and Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report outlines recommendations to introduce a new public spaces protection order which restricts activity within council-owned multi-storey car parks which have suffered sustained issues related to crime and antisocial behaviour. Officers began looking into this last year following a number of complaints from car park users. The council attempted to address this in partnership with the police, and a number of proactive patrols were carried out by council officers, the police and a security company, which has not delivered a sustainable solution to the issues being presented. The most challenging element of this is that of legal powers. When officers are requesting that individuals engaged in criminal or antisocial behaviour leave the site, should they refuse, the only action currently available is to proceed with a civil trespass enforcement through the court, which would take significant resources and time, not addressing the immediate issue. The introduction of a public spaces protection order which restricts such behaviours would provide officers and the police with powers to give a lawful instruction to cease the behaviour or to leave with immediate effect and not to return to the location within 48 hours. Failure to comply with these instructions is a criminal offence and a fixed penalty notice or prosecution. Public consultation took place from the 1st of November to the 30th of November 2023. A copy of the consultation questions is included in Appendix A. A total of 62 respondents completed the questionnaire, with 76% supporting the introduction of this PSPO. A written response was received from the managing agent for Sussex House Car Park. The response outlined the antisocial behaviour and criminal activity that they have experienced over the last 8 years, which included thefts, drug dealing, prostitution, graffiti, criminal damage, nuisance, car racers and skateboarders. The response stated that the council safeguarding their own car parks with a PSPO would shift and intensify the issues onto private car parks. The response requested the inclusion of all town centre multi-storey car parks within the PSPO and stated that without extending the PSPO they would strongly oppose its implementation. It is important to note that it is not the council's responsibility to safeguard the commercial activity of a private managing agent, and when officer were determining whether the legal test has been met for the order, there was a lack of evidence to support the need for this to be extended to Sussex House or any other site, with no reports being made to the council and very few being made to the police. As such, the legal test was not met and should not be considered. The order can, however, be varied should there be an increase in evidenced reports, but the council cannot patrol this site, and addressing ASB remain the responsibility of the landowner managing agent. The Commission is asked to consider the recommendations within the report and to make any comments, if any, it wishes to submit to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. I will now open it up to questions and discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Councillor Lannan?
Thank you. Sort of thank you for the report and trying to do something to address these issues that we're obviously facing. I guess my main question would be, how do we measure the success of this PSPO?
I think the success is a reduction in reports to us and observations made by authorised officers both within parking and the community protection team when carrying out patrols of that site. And that can range from the incursions from groups of individuals using the site for ASB or criminal purposes, and that will be actively measured as required by us when we look at introducing a PSPO, and should we look to extend that beyond the 3-year period for a further 3 years.
Yeah, just one other question I had was, where does if money is, I think the people that we actually target are unlikely to pay much, and I don't think there will be much income from the fines, but I'm just intrigued to know, where would the income from the fines actually get spent? Would it just go into the general fund?
Yes, it would. And I think probably about 50% of the people that would be targeted have a range of vulnerabilities, and that could be substance misuse, for example. There are a range of other options that are used alongside this. So absolutely, if we issue a fixed penalty notice against an individual that we know hasn't got the means to pay, there are a range of other alternative options. But actually, it's supportive interventions that we would be looking to deliver alongside some of our third sector charity partners such as Crawley Open House, and all of that income would be reinvested into the community protection team to deliver wider services.
Set off everybody else now, sorry about that, but yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the report. If I've understood the report correctly, this will empower the police to intervene where there's situations. And reading on the report, it says that the police were consulted. Presumably they're happy that it's all watertight. It does say letters were sent, but no objections were raised. Did we actually get a positive reply, or was it just we took no reply as they were satisfied with it?
Yes, so the police have committed to enforce this, because this is an issue that affects them as well as us, because when members of the public are making complaints about antisocial behaviour, again, because it is a privately owned building, the police have very limited powers. Where you introduce a PSPO, it introduces a criminal offence with failure to comply with that instruction. The police have supported the introduction of the PSPO at a local level. As we always do with the consultation, we submit this to the Chief Constable, who responded with support, and for the PCC's office, where we didn't receive a reply within the time frame that we required for consultation.
Sorry, if I could just say that's fantastic, and it's great that we're working with the police to try and reduce the issues that we've talked about, so thank you.
Is my microphone on? Yeah. Hello, everyone. So when it comes to PSPOs, I'm necessarily not against them when we have a good reason for them. And I've been, and I have studied the report, and I have been reading it. And I just want you, the council, to be able to expand on if there is a review process on the PSPO, how often it will be reviewed, and what the criteria would be for the continuation of the PSPO after a review process has been concluded. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So when we look at a review of a public spaces protection order, the same criteria and same legal test is required at that review process. So we have to evidence that it is detrimental to the quality of lives of others in the locality, it's persistent and it is unreasonable. So they're the three tests, and we would apply the same criteria when we go to review. So we carry out another consultation, and then we also look at the data. So how many interventions have we delivered, how many lawful instructions have we given, and how many fixed penalty notices have we issued or prosecutions have we processed. So it is subject to the same. A PSPO is in place for 3 years. So should full council resolve to introduce this order, it would be in effect for 3 years, and then it is reviewed every 3 years. A PSPO can only be enforced for 3 years.
Okay, thank you for that. I do note that during the consultation process from 510 that the majority of the respondents to the consultation were supportive. I think it was 76% of respondees. So would you say that's a unusual high support for a PSPO on average?
It's really difficult to answer that question, because a PSPO, in terms of responses, it's people that are affected by the issue or not affected by the issue. I'd say 76% in support is a good majority for a PSPO, and it's really important to note that actually the people that we sought to consult were users of the car park. So we had signs up in the car park, so the people that were most affected or not affected by the issue were the ones that pushed forward with the responses. But a 76% is a good majority, and members should be comfortable that actually the public support that with that number.
Right. I just have one more comment to make. The council has introduced some PSPOs recently, and especially the one on Tilgate, and I just want to confirm with the council that there is that a PSPO is only introduced under a very good reason and a strict legislation, because, as I said, I'm not necessarily against PSPOs, but what I don't want to see is a over-reliance. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so we've currently got three PSPOs in force across Crawley, all dealing with very different issues. And I would say, as officers, that legal test has to be met before we even enter into providing a recommendation to members to introduce it. So we would never have before you any PSPO to consider where actually there wasn't an absolute need for it, and officers making really clear and strong recommendations to you as members for that process. But I note the point on over-reliance.
Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, my understanding of the PSPO in this case is that it's empowering not just for police officers, but also for police community support officers and for our authorised council officers. So what was the community wardens team, essentially? I do think there's strong support and strong evidence of need, and I think we should go beyond just noting these recommendations, and I would move that as a commission we express our explicit support for the introduction of this PSPO. Sorry, PSPO, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lanza.
I'd be happy to second that as well.
Councillor Hillier.
Thank you, Chair. I just really have one question in that the PSPO is being added to the Town Hall car park, and may that have a detrimental effect in sort of attracting new tenants to the building?
I can't talk for prospective tenants or new tenants, but what I would say is that I think it would demonstrate a commitment from the council to tackle these issues really robustly. And with the issues faced by users of the car park, the quicker that we deal with these issues robustly, the better, to ensure that actually we're not putting off new tenants who would see this quite visible issue. So I think I can't talk for tenants, but I'd say the council's position would be that the more firmly we deal with this, the better in terms of marketing the new building.
I would say that they might see it as an attractive point, that if there is a problem, we're going to take action straight away.
Yeah, can I just, I was going to speak at the end, but because you brought this up, if I can speak before you, Councillor Speaker. I spoke to Dan about this, and I left a council meeting late because I went to the toilet and everyone had gone and I was the last person. And I came out of the building into the street to go into the car park. The doors open, I got into the car park, the doors closed behind me. I thought, now I'm safe. And then I heard a noise, and when I looked, there was a man laying in a sleeping bag that was around the corner. I'm now trapped in there with him. I had to walk past him to get to the lift, and I was really scared because I didn't know what he was going to do. He didn't do anything. I got into the lift, I shut the door, like the doors closed, and that was when I felt safe. And I just wondered, my question from that ordeal was, how would I have reported that? Because I didn't know who to phone. And it was like, it was a late meeting. It was about 10:30, maybe even 11 o'clock. It was a late meeting like tonight's one. And so there was no one around to know who to actually report that to.
So I think in instances like that where it's a kind of a perception of unsafety where there has been no incident, I'd say always let us know, and we encourage members and residents and businesses and visitors to report predominantly through the My Crawley platform, and you can do that online or via our contact centre, and that helps us to understand where the issues are so that we can plan the resources and responses effectively. In the event where there are significant issues with antisocial behaviour or crime, the number one pathway is to report that to the police. We work in close partnership with the police, so if it isn't for them, they'll make sure that they pass that over to us. But I'd say again, if it's non-urgent, you can report that to us via My Crawley or to Sussex Police. I'd say report it to us, because if we don't know about it, we can't respond to it. And I think that's the most important thing. Should full council resolve to introduce the PSPO, then a new option will appear on the My Crawley platform, which gives you the ability to report antisocial behaviour specifically within multi-storey car parks.
Thank you. I must emphasise though, he did not do anything to me. He didn't even he made a noise, so I knew he was there, but he didn't acknowledge me, he didn't try to speak to me, he didn't do anything like that to make me scared. I was just scared because I'm now unsafe, or I felt unsafe. Thank you. Councillor Piggott.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sharon, and thank you for the report. It's really interesting, and of course I think we're all supporting it. Just one quick clarification, section 4.2, and I think it's been mentioned that a breach for PSPO is a criminal offence, and it mentions fixed penalty notices. Looking at the data and the response data, there seems to be a wide range of events and activities, and what I wanted just assurance that the use of the fixed penalty notice won't be used as a measure of success of the overall PSPO.
I think I can answer that quite robustly. Viewing a PSPO with FPNs is actually showing that your response is not effective. An FPN is a last resort. The instruction given by an authorised officer, the number of instructions and level of compliance is the measure of success. If you are seeing really high rates of non-compliance, that is showing you either the officers are not being effective or the PSPO is not an effective tool. So when we compare kind of these proposals with the tailgate dog control, for example, actually a significantly high rate of compliance with instructions from authorised officers, and since the PSPO was introduced, only 2 FPNs needing to be issued, which for me is a really good measure of success. So I can give you that absolute assurance that as a manager of the service, I don't view FPNs as a measure of success.
All committee. Oh, sorry, Kieran. Yeah, sorry, Councillor Khan.
Hi. I just remembered one point which I was going to make earlier, but then I just forgot to. When I was reading the report, I noticed that the PSPO also covers rough sleeping. Now, I understand there's loads of stigma between ex-homeless people, but I just want to confirm that these people are rough sleepers, and the majority of them are quite vulnerable people, and they need assistance and guidance. So I just want to have confirmed that rough sleepers who are found are treated humanely and are given the support and guidance that they need. Thank you.
So I think a really important distinction to make is rough sleeping is mentioned within the report in relation to what we were being reported. So what people were reporting. Rough sleeping is not antisocial and it is not criminal, and therefore a PSPO cannot and will not be used to address rough sleeping, certainly in Crawley. The government introduced revised guidance for practitioners highlighting exactly this. I think it was in 2021. So a PSPO looks at behaviour. So, when we look at rough sleeping, it is an exceptionally complex issue. Where we would deliver an intervention with a rough sleeper is where there are kind of comorbidities such as substance misuse, where sharps are being discarded. Now, the view is that actually discarding of sharps that we have evidence of, particularly in Orchard Street car park currently, there is no real defence for that, and rough sleeping is not a defence for that. But actually, when you're looking at the issues being presented by that individual, actually what the council's view is that the vulnerabilities and the experiences that person is enduring is the root cause of the issue. The behaviour is symptomatic of that. We work in really close partnership with Crawley Open House and CGL as the West Sussex provider for substance misuse services. And supportive intervention is absolutely the approach that we take. Trauma-informed practice is a kind of a bedrock of the new community protection team, and when delivering those interventions, the officers are acutely aware that everything that they do in terms of that interaction has a consequence with somebody with that level of vulnerability. So again, I can provide reassurance that absolutely we deal with people humanely, but that actually the PSPO is not being used to target rough sleeping. Again, rough sleeping is not antisocial and it is not a criminal offence.
Thank you. The committee members have had the opportunity to speak. So is anyone else would like to ask a question? No? Okay. So I move the recommendation. So, sorry, I move on to the recommendation. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask for the Vice Chair to second, please. Sorry.
Chair, just before, can we? Would there be a vote on the proposal to give explicit support? Yeah.
Yes. Do we agree that? Yeah. That's agreed. Sorry, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Councillor Lanza. Do you
Yes,
second?
and I second that.
Right, thank you. Right, the Commission, do we agree? Yeah. Item 10, establishment and appointment of scrutiny panel. We have received nominations for the waste and recycling scrutiny panel. This needs to be a short series of meetings to meet the contracted deadline of September. In accordance with the Local Government and Housing Act 1989, the Commission is recommended to agree the establishment and nominations for the Waste and Recycling Scrutiny Panel based on a 5-member panel consisting of myself, Councillor Cheriton, Councillor Lanza, Councillor Piggott, Councillor Russell, with nominations for Councillor Piggott and Councillor Russell as Chair. I call for a straight vote between the two nominations for Chair. Those in favour of Councillor Piggott, please raise your hands. Thank you. Those in favour of Councillor Russell, please raise your hands. Thank you. Sorry, what did I say? Oh, right, sorry, I thought you said I said no. Right, the results are 3 for Councillor Piggott and 6 for Councillor Russell. So the result is that Councillor Russell is the Chair. So Councillor Russell is appointed as Chair of Waste and Recycling Scrutiny Panel. And the Waste and Recycling Scrutiny Panel is agreed. Is that agreed?
Yep.
Thank you. Item 11 is HASC. The last meeting of the HASC took place on the 10th of January. Councillor Khan, can you please update the Commission?
Hello everyone. Yes, I did attend the HASC meeting on the 10th of January on behalf of this council, and there are a few things which I want to report which I think would be of interest. So the first main item which I want to report is about the access to dentistry, and some of the points that I want to highlight was that when it came to access to dentistry, there was a report by NHS Sussex. There was a feeling that NHS dental contracts was the cause of many problems facing dentistry, which need to be negotiated, and there was an acceptance that worsening dental health leads to wider problems, so this was of a priority. An action programme is needed for Orange, Chichester and Horsham because of the higher number of units of dental activity, and there should be systems in place between NHS England pulling out of dentistry and NHS Sussex taking over. There was an acceptance that the business model of dentistry needs to be looked at, and there should be an obligation on dentists to see NHS patients, and so that was the bulk of the discussion on NHS dentistry. Bear with me while I scroll through my notes. And the next plan of importance was the Sussex Health and Care Plan. Now there are a few things which I wanted to speak on this about. The People Plan outlines our 5 identified systems, people and priority and actions which will be taken in progression with line of the integrated care system. This plan is about building integrity with community teams and local partnerships across West Sussex, East Sussex and the Brighton and the Hove area, and there needs to be an an improvement of use of digital and technology and for information to help join services and enable people to access advice and care more easily. The Sussex Health and Care Plan is all about improving lives together, and it's built on work that is already taking place, and this is to be set out in the health and well-being strategies in the Brighton and Hove, East Sussex and West Sussex area. And the last item of importance, which I wish to say a few comments about, is the work programme planning and possible items for future scrutiny. Now there was an update on the closure of the Zachary Merton Hospital in Rustington to be brought forward to the business planning group meeting on the 7th of February 2024. So this is obviously a massive item which is to be discussed, and the business planning group is to consider an update on the impact of the closures of the majority Kobe House and Shore Day services, and hopefully we will be finding out more information about this in the due future. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Item 12, forthcoming discussion list. The forthcoming discussion list is featured on your agenda and also on the Council's website. I will ask Heather to list those that have been referred.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. There is currently only one item heading to Cabinet on the 13th of March, which, looking on your agenda, is the Building Control Services Review. But the Commission at the meeting on the 11th of March is also due to receive its update on the Climate Change Action Plan at the same meeting. So given the fact that there's only one item currently due to go to Cabinet, can you kindly let me know if you would like that Cabinet report referred along with the update on the Climate Control Action Plan, please? Thank you.
What is the feeling of the... Does anyone want that to be put on the discussion list?
Yes, at risk of showing my own naivety or lack of experience, what roughly is covered by the Building Control Review, Services Review?
Thank you, Ian.
So we currently have a shared service with Horsham District Council in the provision of building control, and essentially it's a review of that arrangement and the options involved.
Sounds like it might be quite an interesting report if anyone would like. How does people feel about having that? No? Is the census no? Are you going to come in? No. Go on then.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I think it's one of our first kind of pioneering shared services, actually, so it's quite interesting, I suppose, to see where it's going. Yeah.
So is that the census that we'd have it on there? Yeah? Okay, right. Over, please. Right, we now come to Part B, exemption reports. This is a confidential section of the meeting that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the forthcoming item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exemption information as defined in Part 1 of the Scheduled 12A of the Act by virtue of the paragraphs specified against the item. Is that agreed? Agreed? Yeah. The recording and the live stream will now finish, so I wish to thank everyone for watching. Thank you.